Hello everyone, my name is Elijah David, minister of the 12th hour Apostolic Sabbatarian Congregation, Mount Sinai, the 12th hour. In the Liberty Hill, Texas, today is August 10, 2013, or the 4th day of Elul, 2017. We will start our first service on this 7th-day Sabbath with a song entitled, Lead Me to Calvary. Behold my heart, I crown thee now. Thine shall the glory be, lest I forget thy thorn-crowned brow. Lead me to Calvary, lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary. Show me the tomb where thou wast laid, tenderly born and wed. Angels and robes of light array guarded thee while thou slept. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary. Let me not Mary through the gloom come with a gift to thee. Show to me now the empty tomb. Lead me to Calvary, lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary. May I be willing, Yahweh, to bear daily my cross for thee, even the cup of grief to share. Lead me upon for me, lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary. Hello everyone, once again this is Elijah David. We're going to continue where we left off my last study there in Patriarchs and Prophets. We're on chapter 27, I believe, 28, entitled Idolatry at the Sinai. Although Moses was absent, it was a time of the waiting and suspense for the Israel. For the people knew that he had ascended into the mount with the Joshua, and had entered into the cloud of the thick darkness, which could be seen from the plain below, resting on the mountain peak, illuminated from time to time with the lightnings of the divine presence. For they waited eagerly for his return, accustomed as they had been in Egypt unto the material representations of the deity. It had been hard for them to trust in an invisible being, and they had come to rely upon Moses for the sustaining of their faith. Now he was taken from them day after day. Week after week passed, and still he did not return, notwithstanding the cloud was still in the view. It seemed to many in the camp that the leader had deserted them, or that he had been consumed by the devouring fire. During this period of the waiting, there was a time for them to meditate upon the law of the Elohim, which they had heard, and to prepare their hearts for the receiving of the further revelation that he might make unto them. They had none too much time for this work, and had they been thus seeking a clear understanding of the Elohim's requirements, and humbling their hearts before him, they would have been shielded from the temptation, but they did not do this, and they soon became careless, inattentive, and lawless. Especially was this the case with the mixed multitude, for they were impatient to be on their way unto the promised land. That is, the land flowing with the milk and honey, for it was only on the condition of the obedience that the good of land was promised unto them. If they had lost sight of this, there were some who suggested a return unto Egypt, but whether forward unto Canaan or backward unto Egypt, the masses of the people were determined to wait no longer for the Moses. For the feeling of their helplessness in the absence of their leader, they returned unto their old superstition. The mixed multitude had been the first indulged of the murmuring and impatience, and they were the leaders in the apostasy that followed. Among the objects regarded by the Egyptians as the symbols of the deity was the ox or calf, and it was at the suggestion that those who had practiced this form of idolatry in Egypt, that a calf was now made and worshipped, for the people desired some image to represent Elohim and to go before them in the place of the Moses. Elohim had given no manner of similitude of himself, and he had prohibited any material representation for such a purpose. For the mighty miracles in Egypt and at the Red Sea were designed to establish faith in him as the invisible, all-powerful helper of the Israel, as the only true Elohim, as the only true King Yahshua, that is, so he's the one that was leading. There in the wilderness, he's the one that called Moses to go down to Egypt. Yahshua is the one that went with him in the cloud. Okay, and the desire for some visible manifestation of his presence had been granted in the pillar of the cloud and of the fire that guided their host, and in the revealing of his glory upon Mt Sinai. Ready with the cloud of the presence still before them, they turned back in their hearts unto the idolatry of Egypt and represented the glory of the invisible Elohim by the similitude of an ox. In the absence of the Moses, the judicial authority had been delegated unto the Aaron. Okay. And a vast crowd gathered about his tent with the demand, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him. For the cloud, they said, that had heretofore led them, now rested permanently up on the mount, for it was no longer direct, would no longer direct their travels, for they must have an image in its place, and if, as had been suggested, they should decide to return unto Egypt, they would find favor with the Egyptians by the bearing of this image before them and acknowledging it as their God. Such crisis demanded a man of firmness, decision, and unflinching courage, one who held the honor of Elohim above popular favor, personal safety, or life itself. But the present leader of Israel was not of this character, and feebly remonstrated with the people. But his wavering and timidity at the critical moment only rendered them the more determined. For the tumult increased, a blind, unreasoning frenzy seemed to take possession of the multitude. There were some who remained true in their covenant to Elohim, but the greater part of the people joined in the apostasy. For a few who ventured for the denouncing of the proposed image making as idolatry were set up on and roughly treated, and in the confusion and excitement they finally lost their lives. Aaron feared for his own safety, and instead of nobly standing up for the honor of Yahweh, he yielded unto the demands of the multitude. His first act was to direct that golden earring be collected from all the people and brought unto him, hoping that pride would lead them to refuse such a sacrifice, but they willingly yielded unto their ornaments, and from these he made a molten calf, an imitation of the god of the Eden. For the people proclaimed, these be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And Aaron basically permitted this insult unto the Yeshua, or he did more, saying with what satisfaction the golden calf or the golden god was received, he built an altar before it and made proclamation. Tomorrow is a feast unto Yahweh, or the announcement was heralded by the trumpeters from company to company throughout the camp, and they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and to drink, and rose up to play under the pretense of holding a feast unto the Yeshua. They gave themselves up unto the idolatry and licentiousness. How often in our own day is a love of the pleasure disguised by a form of the godliness, or this godlessness, a religion that permits men, while observing the rites of worship, to devote themselves to selfish or sinful gratification, is as pleasing to the multitudes now as in the days of Israel, and there are still pliant errands who, while holding positions of the authority in the church, will yield unto the desires of the unconsecrated and thus encourage them in the sin. Only a few days had passed since the Hebrews had made a solemn covenant with the Yahweh to obey his voice. They had stood trembling with the terror before the mountain, listening unto the words of the Yahweh. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. The glory of the Elohim still hovered above the Sinai on the side of the congregation, but they turned away and asked for other gods. They made a calf in the Horeb and worshipped the molten image. Thus they changed their glory into the similitude of an ox. Psalms 106:19 and 20. How could greater ingratitude have been shown, or more daring insult offered unto him who had revealed himself unto them as a tender father and an all-powerful king? Moses in the mount was warned of the apostasy in the camp in which he erected to return without the delay. Go get thee down, were the words of the Yahweh. Thou people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves, for they have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf and have worshipped it. Elohim might have checked the movement at the outset, but he suffered it to come unto this height, that he might teach all a lesson in his punishment of the treason and apostasy. For the Elohim's covenant with his people had been disannulled, and he declared unto Moses, Let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. For the people of the Israel, especially the mixed multitude, would be constantly disposed to rebel against Elohim, for they would also murmur against their leader, and would grieve him by their unbelief, and stubbornness, and it would be a laborious and soul-trying work to lead them into the promised land. For their sins had already forfeited the favor of the Elohim, and justice called for their destruction. So Yahweh therefore proposed to destroy them and make of Moses a mighty nation. Let me alone, that I may consume them, were the words of Elohim. If Elohim had purposed to destroy Israel, who could plead for them? How few but would have left the sinners unto their fate? How few but would have gladly exchanged a lot of toil and burden and sacrifice, repaid with the ingratitude and murmurings for the position of the ease and honor, when it was Elohim himself that offered the release. Brother Moses discerned ground for the hope where there appeared only discouragement and wrath. For the words of Elohim, let me alone, he understood not to forbid, but to encourage intercession, implying that nothing but the prayers of Moses could save Israel, but that if thus entreated, Elohim would spare his people. For he besought Yahweh, his Elohim, and said, Yahweh, why doth thy wrath wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt with a great power and with a mighty hand? For the Elohim has signified that he disowned his people. He has spoken of them unto Moses as thy people, which thou broughtest out of Egypt. Brother Moses humbly disclaimed the leadership of Israel. They were not his, but Elohim, thy people, which thou hast brought forth with great power and with a mighty hand. And wherefore he urged, should the Egyptians speak and say, for mischief did he bring them out to slay them in the mountains and to consume them from the face of the earth. During the few months since Israel left Egypt, the report of their wonderful deliverance had spread into all the surrounding nations. Fear and trembling and forebodings rested upon the heathen. All were watching to see what the Elohim of Israel would do for his people. Should they now be destroyed, their enemies would triumph and Elohim would be dishonored. For the Egyptians would claim that their accusations were true. Instead of the leading of his people into the wilderness to sacrifice, he had called them to be sacrificed. They would not consider the sins of Israel for the destruction of the people whom he had so signally honored, but bring reproach upon his name. How great the responsibility resting upon those whom the Elohim has highly honored, to make his name a praise in the earth. With what care should they guard against committing a sin, to call down his judgment and cause his name to be reproached by the ungodly. As Moses interceded for the Israel, his timidity was lost in his deep interest and love for those of whom he had, in the hands of Elohim, been the means of doing so much. For Yahweh listened unto his pleadings and granted his unselfish prayer. For the Elohim had proved his servant, he had attested his faithfulness and his love for that erring, ungrateful people. And nobly had Moses endured the trial, for his interest in the Israel sprang from no selfish motive. For the prosperity of the Elohim's chosen people was dearer unto him than the personal honor, dearer than the privilege of the becoming the father of a mighty nation. The Elohim was pleased with his faithfulness, his simplicity of the heart, and his integrity, and he committed unto him as a faithful shepherd the great charge of leading Israel into the promised land. As Moses and Joshua came down the mount preparing the tables of the testimony, they heard the shouts and outcries of the excited multitude, evidently in a state of the wild uproar. Joshua the soldier The first thought was of an attack from their enemies. There is a noise of war in the camp, he said. Brother Moses judged more truly the nature of the commotion, for the sound was not that of a combat but of revelry. It is not the voice of them that shout for the master, neither is it the voice of them that cry for the being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear. As they drew near the encampment, they beheld the people shouting and dancing round their idol. It was a scene of the heathen riot, imitation of the idolatrous feast of the Egypt, but how unlike the solemn and reverent worship of the Elohim. Moses was overwhelmed. He had just come from the presence of Elohim's glory, and though he had been warned of what was taking place, he was unprepared for that dreadful execution of the degradation of the Israel. His anger was hot. To show him the points of their crime, he threw down the tables of the stone, and they were broken in the sight of all the people, thus signifying that as they had broken their covenant with Elohim, for Elohim had broken his covenant with him. Entering the camp, Moses passed through the crowds of the revelers, and seizing upon the idol, cast it into the fire. The afterwards ground it to powder, and having strewed it upon the stream that descended from the mount, he made the people drink of it. Thus was shown the utter worthlessness of the God which they had been worshiping. For the great leader summoned his guilty brother and sternly demanded, what did this people unto thee, that thou hast brought so great a sin upon them? For the Aaron endeavored to shield himself by the religion of the clamors of the people. If he had not complied with their wishes, he would have been put to death. Let not the anger of my master wax hot, he said. Thou knowest the people, that they are set on the mischief. For they said unto me, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. And I said unto them, whosoever hath any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it unto me, and I cast it into the fire, and they came out this calf. Now, boy, isn't that telling a long yarn? That's a tall story. He would lead Moses to believe that a miracle had been wrought, that the gold had been cast into the fire, and by the supernatural power changed unto a calf. But his excuses and prevarications were of no avail, for he was justly dealt with as the chief offender. For the fact that Aaron had been blessed and honored so far above the people was what made his sin so heinous. For it was Aaron, the saint of the Yahweh, Psalm 106:16, that had made the idol and announced the feast. It was he who had been appointed as spokesman for the Moses, and concerning him that Elohim himself had testified. I know that he could speak well. Exodus 4:14. That had failed to check the idolaters in their haven of daring purpose. He by whom Elohim had wrought in bringing judgment both upon the Egyptians and upon their gods, had heard unmoved the proclamation before the molten image. These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. It was he who had been with Moses on the mount, and had there beheld the glory of the Yahweh, who had seen that in the manifestation of that glory there was nothing of which an image could be made. It was he who had changed that glory into the similitude of an ox, he unto whom Elohim had committed the government of the people in the absence of the Moses, was found sanctioning their rebellion. And Yahweh was very angry with the Moses to have destroyed him, Deuteronomy 9:20. But in the answer unto the earnest intercession of the Moses, which life was spared, and in repentance and humiliation for his great sin, he was restored unto the favor of the Yahweh. If Aaron had courage to stand for the right, irrespective of the consequences, he could have prevented that apostasy. He had unswervingly maintained his own allegiance unto Elohim. If he had sided the people for the perils of Sinai and had reminded them of their solemn covenant with the Elohim to obey his law, evil would have been checked. But his compliance with the desires of the people and the calm assurance with which he proceeded to carry out their plan, emboldened them to go to greater lengths in the sin than had before entered their mind. When the Moses on return of the camp confronted the rebels, his severe rebukes and the indignation he displayed in the breaking of the sacred tables of law were contrasted by the people with his brother's pleasant speech and dignified demeanor, and his sympathies were with the Aaron. To justify himself, Aaron endeavored to make the people responsible for his weakness and the yielding unto their demand, but notwithstanding this, they were filled with the admiration of his gentleness and patience. But Elohim seeth not as man sees, for the Aaron's yielding spirit and his desire of faith had blinded his eyes to the enormity of the crime he was sanctioning. His course in giving his influence for the sin in the Israel cost the life of the thousand. And what contrast with this was the course of the Moses, who, while faithfully executing Elohim's judgment, showed that the welfare of Israel was dearer unto him than prosperity or honor or life. All the sins that the Elohim will punish, none are more grievous in his sight than those that encourage others to do evil. Elohim would have his servants prove their loyalty by the faithfully rebuking transgression. However painful the act may be, those who are honored with the divine commission are not to be weak, quiet, time service. They are not to aim at the self-exaltation or to shun disagreeable duties, but to perform Elohim's work with unswerving fidelity. Though the Elohim had granted the prayer of Moses in the sparing Israel from the destruction, their apostasy was to be signally punished for the lawlessness of the and insubordination into which Aaron had permitted them to fall, if not speedily crushed, would run riot in the wickedness and would involve the nation in the irretrievable ruin. By the terrible severity, the evil must be put away. Standing in the gate of the camp, Moses called unto the people, who is on the Yahweh side, let him come unto me. Those who had not joined in the apostasy were to take their position at the right of the Moses. Those who were guilty but repentant at the left. The command was obeyed. It is found that the tribe of the Levi had taken no part in the idolatrous worship from among other tribes. There were great numbers who, although they had sinned, now signified their repentance, but a large company, mostly of the mixed multitude, that instigated the making of the calf, stubbornly persisted in their rebellion. And the name of the Yahweh Elohim of the Israel, Moses now commanded those upon his right hand who had kept themselves clear of the idolatry to gird on their swords and slay all who persisted in rebellion. And there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men, without regard unto the position, kindred, or friendship. The ringleaders and the wickedness were cut off, but all who repented and humbled themselves were spared. Okay, those who performed this terrible work of the judgment were acting by the divine authority, executing the sentence of the King of heaven. Men are to be aware how they, in their human blindness, judge and condemn their fellow men, but when the Elohim commands them to execute his sentence upon the iniquity, he is to be obeyed. Those who perform this painful act thus manifested their abhorrence of rebellion and idolatry and consecrated themselves more fully unto the service of the true Elohim. Yahweh honored their faithfulness by the bestowing special distinction upon the tribe of Levi. Therefore the Israelites had been guilty of the treason, and that against a king who had loaded them with the benefits and whose authority they had voluntarily pledged themselves to obey, that the divine government might be maintained, justice must be visited upon the traitors. Yet even here Elohim's mercy was displayed. While he maintained his law, he granted freedom of the choice and opportunity for the repentance of all. Only those were cut off who persisted in the rebellion. It was necessary that this sin should be punished as a testimony before the surrounding nations of the Elohim's displeasure against the idolatry. God executing justice upon the guilty Moses as the Elohim's instrument must leave on the record a solemn and public protest against their crime. As the Israelites should hereafter condemn the idolatry of the neighboring tribes, their enemies would throw back upon them the charge that the people who claim Yahweh and Yahshua as their king had made a calf and worshipped it in horror. This is something we'll have to get used to, folks. I'm going to have to get used to talking about in the place of Yahweh the Father. It's going to be Yahshua. This is what was new to them all. They had heard of the invisible Yahweh. And they knew about the invisible one, but they were now getting acquainted with someone that could be very visible to them. And that was his son, the presence of his son. Why was it that Yahweh put it upon his son to come down here and take care of this business? Yahweh has the universe to run in the heavens. And he has to attend to his throne. And since his son agreed to pay the price for the sin of the fallen man and to die in his place to redeem fallen man, then he let him inherit this world and everything that goes with it. And so Yahshua is really the one we're talking about when we say that he made communication with Moses and so forth. Then, though compelled to acknowledge the disgraceful truth, Israel could point unto the terrible fate of the transgressors as the evidence that their sin had been sanctioned or excused. Love, no less than justice, demanded that for his sin judgment should be inflicted. Elohim is a guardian as well as a sovereign of his people. For he cuts off those who are determined upon rebellion, that they may not lead others to ruin. In sparing the life of the king, Elohim had demonstrated unto the universe what would be the result of permitting sin to go unpunished. The influence exerted upon his descendants by his life and teaching led unto the state of the corruption that demanded the destruction of the whole world by a flood. For the history of the antediluvians testifies that long life is not a blessing to the sinners. Elohim's great forbearance did not repress their wickedness, for the longer men lived, the more corrupt they became. But with the apostasy at the Sinai, unless punishment had been speedily visited upon the transgression, the same results would again have been seen. For the earth would have become as corrupt as in the days of Noah. Had these transgressors been spared, evil would have followed greater than resulted from the sparing of the life of the king. For it was a mercy that Elohim the thousand should suffer for the preventing of the necessity of the visiting judgments upon the million. In order to save the many, he must punish the few. Furthermore, as the people had cast off their allegiance unto Elohim, they have forfeited the divine protection and deprived of their defense. The whole nation was exposed unto the power of their enemies. Had not the evil been promptly put away, they would soon have fallen prey unto their numerous and powerful foes. It is necessary for the good of Israel, and also as a lesson unto all succeeding generations, that crime should be promptly punished, and it was no less a mercy unto the sinners themselves, that they should be kept short in their evil course. Had their life been spared, the same spirit that led them to rebel against the Elohim would have been manifested in the hatred and strife among themselves. And they would eventually have destroyed one another. It was in the love for the world, and the love for the Israel, and even for the transgression, that crime was punished with a swift and terrible severity. As the people were roused to see the enormity of their guilt, terror pervaded the entire encampment. For it was feared that every offender was to be cut off. Pleading their distress, Moses promised to plead once more with the Yahweh for them. Ye have sinned a great sin, he said, and now I will go up unto Yahweh, peradventure, and I shall make an atonement for your sin. He went, and in his confession before Elohim, he said, Oh, this people have sinned a great sin, and have made them gods of gold. Yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book, which thou hast written. The answer was, Whosoever has sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. Therefore now go, lead the people into the place of which I have spoken unto thee. Behold, mine angel shall go before thee, nevertheless, in the day when I will visit their sin upon them. In the prayer of Moses, our minds are directed unto the heavenly records, in which the names of all men are inscribed, and their deeds, whether good or evil, it says, are faithfully registered. For the book of the life contains the names of all who have ever entered into the service of the Yahweh. If any of these depart from him, and by the stubborn persistence in the sin become finally hardened against the influences of his Holy Spirit, their names will be in the judgment to be blotted from the book of the life, and they themselves will be devoted unto destruction. Moses realized how dreadful would be the fate of the sinner. Yet if the people of Israel were to be rejected by the Yahweh, he desired his name to be blotted out with theirs. He could not endure to see the judgment of the Elohim fall upon those who had been so graciously delivered. For the intercession of the Moses in behalf of the Israel illustrates the mediation of the Yahshua for the sinful man. If the Yahweh did not permit Moses to bear, as did the Yahshua, the guilt of the transgression, whosoever has sinned against me, he said, him will I blot out of my book. Okay, folks. If you're breaking the law of Moses, that has been restored since 1970, the sanctuary system put back in full operation, the holy days restored unto Israel with the Sabbath. And then if you're not observing the ordinances of true worship, then you're sinned against Yahweh, and he's going to blot your name out of his book. In the deep sadness, the people had buried their dead. 3,000 had fallen by the sword. A plague had soon after broken out in the encampment. And now the message came to them that the divine presence would no longer accompany them in their journey. For the Yahweh had declared, I will not go up in the midst of thee, for thou art a stiff-necked people. Thus I consumed thee in the way, and the command was given, put off thy ornaments from thee, that I may know what to do unto thee. For there was a mourning throughout the encampment, and repentance and humiliation. the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments by the Mount Horeb. Okay, it says, by the divine direction, the tent that had served as a temporary place of worship was removed far off from the camp. This was still further evidence that Elohim had withdrawn his presence from them. He would reveal himself unto Moses, but not to such a people. The rebuke was keenly felt, and unto the conscience-smitten multitude it seemed a foreboding of a greater calamity. Had not the Yahweh separated Moses from the camp that he might utterly destroy them? But they were not left without the hope, for the tent was pitched without the encampment, but Moses called it the tabernacle of the congregation. All who were truly repentant and desired to return to Yahweh were directed to repair thither, to confess their sins and seek his mercy. When they returned unto their tents, Moses entered the tabernacle with the agonizing interest. The people watched for some token that his intercession for their behalf were accepted. If the Elohim or the Yeshua should condescend to meet with them, they might hope that they were not to be utterly concerned. When the cloudy pillar descended and stood at the entrance of the tabernacle, the people wept for the joy, and they rose up and worshipped every man in his tent door. For the Moses knew well the perversity and blindness of those who were placed under his care. For he knew the difficulties with which he must contend. But he had learned that in order to prevail with the people, he must have help from the Elohim. For he pleaded for a clear revelation. Okay, and for the Elohim's will and for an assurance of his presence. See, thou sayest unto me, bring up this people, and thou hast not let me know whom thou wilt send with me. Yet thou hast said, I know thee by the name. And thou hast found grace in my sight. Now therefore I pray thee, if I have found grace in thy sight, show me now thy way, that I may know thee, that I may find grace in thy sight, and consider that this nation is thy people. For the answer was, my presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. But Moses was not yet satisfied. There pressed upon his soul a sense of the terrible results. Should Elohim leave Israel to hardness and repentance, he could not endure that his interests should be separated from those of his brethren. And he prayed that the favor of the Elohim might be restored unto his people, and that the token of his presence might continue to direct their journeyings. If thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence, for wherein shall it be known here that I and thy people have found grace in thy sight? Is it not in that thou goest with us, so shall we be separated? I and thy people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth. And the Yahweh said, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken. Thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by name. But still the prophet did not cease pleading. Every prayer had been answered. But he thirsted for the greater tokens of Elohim's favor. He now made a request that no human being had ever made before. I beseech thee, show me thy glory. But Elohim did not rebuke his request as presumptuous. But the gracious words were spoken, I will make all my goodness pass before thee. For the unveiled glory of the Elohim, no man in this mortal state can look upon and live. But Moses was assured that he should behold as much of the divine glory as he could endure. Again he was summoned to the mountain summit. Then the hand that had made the world, that hand that removeth the mountains, and they know not, Job 9:5, took this creature of the dust, this mighty man of faith, and placed him in a cleft of the rock, while the glory of the Elohim and all his goodness passed before him. This experience above all else, the promise that the divine presence would attend him, was unto Moses an assurance of the success and the work before him, and he counted the infinitely greater worth than all the learning of Egypt, or all his attainments, as a statement or a mighty leader. No earthly power or skill or learning can supply the place of the Elohim's abiding presence. Unto the transgressor it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim. Whereas Moses stood alone in the presence of the Eternal One, and he was not afraid, for his soul was in the harmony with the will of his Maker. Says the psalmist, if I regard iniquity in my heart, Yahweh will not hear me. Psalm 66:18. But the secret of the Yahweh is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant. Psalm 25:14. For the deity proclaimed himself, the Yahweh Elohim, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in the goodness and truth, keeping mercy for the thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty. Moses made haste and bowed his head toward the earth and worshipped. Again he entreated that the Elohim would pardon the iniquity of his people and take them for his inheritance. His prayer was granted, for the Yahweh graciously promised to renew his favor unto Israel, and in their behalf to do marvels such as had not been done in all the earth, or nor in any nation. 40 days and nights Moses remained in the mount, and during all this time, as at the first, he was miraculously sustained. No man had been permitted to go up with him, nor during the time of his absence were any to approach the mount at the Elohim's command. He had prepared 2 tables of stone, and had taken with him unto the summit, and again the Yahweh wrote upon the tables the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Okay, during that long time spent in the communion with the Elohim, the face of Moses had reflected the glory of the divine presence. Unknown unto himself, his face shone with a dazzling light when he descended from the mountain. Such a light illuminated the countenance of the Stephen when brought before his judges. And all that sat in the council, looking steadfastly on him, saw his face as it had been the face of an angel. Acts 6:15. But Aaron as well as the people shrank away from the Moses, and they were afraid to come nigh him, seeing their confusion and terror, but ignorant of the cause, he urged them to come near. He held out unto them the pleasure of the Elohim's reconciliation, and assured them of his restored favor. But he perceived in his voice nothing but love and entreaty, and at last one ventured to approach him. Too awed to speak, he silently pointed unto the countenance of the Moses, and then toward heaven. But the great leader understood his meaning, and their conscious guilt, feeling themselves still under the divine displeasure, they could not endure the heavenly light, which, had they been obedient unto the Elohim, would have filled them with the joy. There is fear in the guilt, for the soul that is free from sin will not wish to hide from the light of the heaven. Moses had much to communicate unto them, and compassionating their fear, he put a veil upon his face, and continued to do so hereafter whenever he returned unto the camp from the communion with the Elohim. By this brightness, Elohim designed to impress upon the Israel the sacred, exalted character of his law and the glory of the gospel revealed through the Yeshua. Now here's that glory of the gospel, and we know that's 2 parts of an old English word. God spelled it out, that's in the pagan term, through the law of Moses. Okay, for the Yahweh Elohim, he spelled it out, yes, through the sacrificial system of the sanctuary that depicted Yahshua's great sacrifice and his continuing sacrifice once he paid the ultimate sacrifice. He resurrects, goes into the heavens, and continues on offering up his blood on a daily basis by the blood of sprinkling. And so therefore the glory of the gospel is reached down to our day through the faith of the blood of Yahshua. While Moses in the Mount Elohim presented unto him not only the tables of the law, but also the plan of the salvation. Oh, Yahweh revealed unto Moses his Ten Commandment law, and then he revealed unto him the laws of his Son, the commandments of his Son, which is the laws of the sanctuary system. And it's called the plan of salvation. He saw that the sacrifice of the Yahshua was prefigured by all the types and symbols of the Jewish age. And it was a heavenly light streaming from the Calvary, no less, in the glory of the law of the Yahweh Elohim, that shed such a radiance upon the face of the Moses. That divine illumination symbolized the glory of the dispensation of which the Moses was the visible mediator, a representative of the one true intercession. For the glory reflected in the countenance of the Moses illustrates the blessing to be received by the Elohim's commandment-keeping people. Through the mediation of Yahshua, it testifies of the personal or communion with the Elohim, and the clearer our knowledge of his requirements, the more fully shall we be conformed unto the divine image, and the more readily do we become partakers of the divine nature. Moses was the type of Yahshua, as it is with an essential veil his countenance, because the people could not endure to look upon his glory. For Yahshua, the divine mediator, veiled his divinity with the humanity. When he came to earth, had he come clothed with the brightness of the heaven, he could not have found excess in the men in their sinful state, for they could not have endured the glory of his presence. Therefore, he humbled himself and was made in the likeness of the sinful flesh, Romans 8:2, that he might reach the fallen race and lift them up. End of chapter 28. Well, we're just like about 3 minutes before we're through with this study. So let's just do a little review of what we just talked about here. The main thing that we just learned at the very last here, it says, while Moses was in the mount, Elohim presented unto him not only the tables of the law, but also the plan of salvation. Okay. So there are two parts of the law. Okay. Where it says right there in Galatians 3:19, wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of the transgression. Okay. Now, we might turn to that quickly and read it. Let's close out this study with the reading about the Galatians chapter 3. O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you that you should not obey the truth? That's the truth of the plan of salvation through the blood of the Yahshua. Before whose eyes Yahshua Messiah hath been evidently set forth crucified among you. There it is, right there. This only would I learn of you, received you the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of the faith? Are you so foolish, having begun in the Spirit? Are ye now made perfect by the flesh? Okay, I'll say it to anybody else. Have you begun the Spirit here with the truth? At the Mt Sinai, the 12th down at Liberty Hill, Texas? Are you making it perfect through your serving your own flesh now? If you suffered so many things in vain, if it be yet in vain, he therefore that ministereth unto you the Spirit and worketh miracles among you, doeth he it by the works of the law or by the hearing of the faith? Okay, it said, even as Abraham believed Elohim, and it was accounted unto him for righteousness. Okay. Know ye therefore that they which are of the faith and the blood of Yahshua, the same are the children of Abraham. And And the scripture foreseeing that Elohim would justify the heathen through faith that preached before the gospel unto the Abraham, saying, in thee shall all the nations be blessed. So then they which be of the faith in the blood of Yahshua are blessed with the faithful Abraham. For as many as are under the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. But that no man is justified by the law on the side of the Elohim, it is evident, for the just shall live by the faith in the blood of the Yahshua. And the law is not of the faith of the blood of the Yahshua. For the law is not of the faith in the blood of the Yahshua, but the man that doeth them shall live in them. So if you do the law, you shall live in them. For Yahshua hath redeemed us from the curse of the law. He hath made a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. That the blessing of the Abraham might come on the Gentiles through the Yahshua Messiah, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through the faith in the blood of the Yahshua. Brethren, I speak after the manner of men, though it be but a man's covenant. Yet if it be confirmed, no man disannulleth or added thereto. Now unto Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and unto seeds as of many, but as of one, and unto thy seed which is in the Yahshua. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of the Yahweh in the Yahshua, the law, okay, it says, which was 430 years afterward, cannot disannul, that it should make the promise of none effect. For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of the promise. But Elohim gave it unto Abraham by the promise. Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of the transgressions. Well, you didn't have that law added of sacrifice of animals, requiring the death of an animal, until a man sinned and came under the death penalty himself. So it says, wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of the transgression, so the seed should come unto whom the promise was made, and it is ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. Okay. This brings us to the rest of this hour. You can contact us at the $11 call. That's number 11. We'll close this service now. And the song entitled, What a Friend We Have in Yahshua. What a friend